In 1978, my dad made a decision that would change our family's lives forever. Hey, Jeff, come on, it's time. We're going to the airport. With those words, we would begin a journey that would come through compassion and freedom. When we got to Shreveport International Airport, we met with a Russian English interpreter and headed to the gate. We were there to meet Alex and Elizabeth, a 20-something couple of Jewish engineers from Russia. They were coming from the Soviet Union it was the end of a long, grueling journey, from oppression to freedom, and that's not a hyperbole. Back then, the Soviet Union, USSR, was made up of 15 republics. It was, after all, USSR stood for the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. For example, the Georgian SSR, the Ukraine SSR, Kazakh SSR, etc. While there were 15 SSRs, there were 16 nationalities on the papers. And when you were in the Soviet Union, everybody had papers. We must see your papers. So if you were in Ukraine and born in Ukraine, your papers said you were Ukrainian. If you were in Uzbekistan SSR, your papers said Uzbek, unless you were a Jew. No matter where you were in the Soviet Union, from Ukraine in the west all the way to Vladivostok on the Pacific Ocean in the east, across 8.6 million square miles, if you were Jewish, your papers simply said Yevra, Jew. In 1960s, so Alex and Elizabeth, they were not just an ordinary couple of engineers. They were brave people. They were refuseniks. They had chutzpah. They had applied to get out of the Soviet Union. In the 1960s, this was wartime. It was the Cold War. In the 1960s, from 1960 to 1970, only 4,000 people legally left the Soviet Union. In the 1970s, it became a golden age, as it were, of getting out. 250,000 people were able to get out of the Soviet Union. What happened was Jews and other peace-loving people started to lobby their politicians to have treaties involved where Jews and other people were involved in the treaties with the Soviets to get people out. So when America formed a treaty with the Russians, including nuclear arms treaties, they included getting people out of every treaty had numbers of them letting Jews and others out of the Soviet Union to freedom. And Alex and Elizabeth were lucky enough to get one of those golden tickets, their trip to freedom. And how did I wind up at this airport in 1978 when it was time to meet them? Well, that's because of my dad. My father, Bernie Klein, of blessed memory, was a social worker by training and a Jewish professional by trade. What that meant was he worked for nonprofits, and starting with out of college, he worked for the B'nai B'rith Youth Organization, training and working with teenagers, teaching them about leadership, community, Israel, and Judaism and Jewish culture. These were kids from Dallas, from Houston, from Tallahassee, Florida, and Mobile, Alabama, but they were also from smaller towns like Ruston, Louisiana, and Yazoo City, Mississippi, where they might be the only Jewish kids in town. And BYO was their chance to be around other Jewish kids their age. From the age of 3 to the age of 10, we traveled in the station wagon every summer from Dallas to Centenary College in Shreveport, Louisiana, for 4 weeks of conventions and training with these kids. I remember one summer where we spent the time doing a Q&A, question and answer period with some refuseniks from the Soviet Union over the phone. And the phone line was blurry and cracky, but we could understand what they were saying. And Dad led this conversation with these other teenagers while I listened. And these folks were refuseniks, the folks trying to get out of the Soviet Union, and we heard their plight. So even in 1970 and 71, Dad was encouraged and concerned with the issue of the Soviet Jews in Russia. My Zaidi, my grandfather in Yiddish, came from Eastern Europe, and he sailed. We never knew his exact age because he had to lie about his age to come to America. He sailed alone on a ship into New York Harbor, past the Statue of Liberty, into Ellis Island. And when he arrived, he had one sister in McKeesport, Pennsylvania. He was able to bring his sister and 4 brothers along with after him to America and bring them to the dream of freedom in America. He had 6 kids right to adulthood. He had 2 wives pass away, and he was married 3 times. My father was born and raised in orphanages, in yeshivas, which are Jewish boarding schools. And when he graduated high school, he went into the Air Force, mainly to avoid getting sent to the draft and sent to Korea. From the Air Force, Dad took advantage of the training and went to colleges all across the country, from all across the world, from Newfoundland to Illinois. Everywhere he was stationed, he attended colleges to get his degree and his master's in social work. He even taught, he worked at the base radio stations. He was even a chaplain on several bases around the world. He did bar mitzvah training in St. John's Bay in Newfoundland. We even went to the bar mitzvah of the kid of one of the people he taught bar mitzvah when we lived in Dallas a few years ago. The world is a funny place and quite small sometimes. And that was quite a fun weekend. The next job after B'nai B'rith was we went to Schenectady, New York, and Dad worked at the Jewish Community Center in Schenectady, and what followed was a job in Wayne, New Jersey at the Young Men's and Women's Hebrew Association in Wayne, New Jersey, and the following job was the executive director of the Jewish Federation in Shreveport, Louisiana, a town we had a history with. And then in 1977, we moved from Wayne, New Jersey to Shreveport, Louisiana. And Dad's main responsibility as director of Federation was to raise money. And he was successful in doing that to the extent that Shreveport became the largest community, or became the highest per capita giving community for small towns of Jewish Federation. And I think he did that because he gave them the opportunity to do something that they couldn't say no to. This group of 2,000 Jews put together an effort to bring Soviet Jews to freedom in America. When Dad went to meet with the people at HIAS, H-I-A-S, the organization that placed these refugees, these refuseniks, he went to meet with their representative, and the representative said, "So I see what you put together, and I think, so what do you think, a family of 4 or a family of 5? "No, we're taking 30 people." In his later years, Dad fondly recalled that story and the look on that representative's face when he told him the number. Not only did they plan to take 30 people, but they did that job. They brought 30 people to the United States to freedom. In following years, we had those folks over for Passover Seder. And the next group that came over in 1979, we went to the airport again. And there we were there to welcome Sam and Val and their 10-year-old daughter, Natalie. Sam and Val went on to bring Val's brother, Boris, and his wife, Seema. And Seema went on to have a daughter in America, who was born in America. Natalie went to the University of Texas in Austin. Sam and Val live in Dallas now. Boris's son, Carl, went to Garland High School, and he has a son named Adam, they live in Dallas now. And the next family to come was Michael with his parents, and Michael was the first one to come, who was our age, my age at the time, and he joined us at the high school, his parents and younger siblings. Michael's English teacher taught him that the English was a funny language, and that the word for one of the utensils we eat with is also the word for fornication. We explained that was a mistake after we had a good laugh about it, but they kept on coming. And at one of the Passover Seders we hosted, during the story of Passover, Moses appears before Pharaoh and says, "Let my people go." And Sam turns to Dad and says, "Bernie, you are our Moses." Dad was visibly moved, and he remembered the lesson from the Talmud that when you save one person, it's as if you saved the whole world. And we recently started a Facebook group to try to gather these folks, these descendants of the people that came to Shreveport in the late 70s and early 80s, because we wonder, how many people came because of the efforts that Dad started in Shreveport. And we really would like to know more and more about this legacy that my father, Bernie Klein, the Moses of Shreveport, left behind. Thank you.